Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Well, we're back, Rube. This is our second podcast on Monday. Obviously a necessary one here. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Doug Pederson out as Eagles head coach. He was fired by Jeff Lurie on Monday. We're going to go through our reactions to the firing, where it went wrong, where the Eagles go from here. We will break down Jeff Lurie's 42-ish minute, pretty wild 42 minutes press conference. And then we'll try to make some picks for who incoherence is another word. Then we'll try to make some picks for who we think the Eagles are going to hire as their next head coach. But Rube, before we even get into the press conference and where the Eagles go from here, instant reactions to the news on Monday afternoon that Doug Pederson had been fired.
You know, it's funny. I was shocked, but not surprised, if that makes sense. You know, because you kind of knew it was coming, especially when we learned that there was going to be a second meeting. I mean, there's never a second meeting when it's going to be good. And so you kind of knew it was over, but you're still shocked because it's unprecedented for a guy who led a team to a Super Bowl 3 years earlier to get fired. It just, it happened once with very, very specific circumstances. There was a dispute between the general manager and the coach over who the quarterback was. But really, this is unprecedented. Gruden was the fastest guy. And he was fired 6 years after winning a Super Bowl. And so there's an element of shock just because I can't believe he really did it. But everything's kind of pointed this way for a little while now. And so it's really not that surprising.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it on previous pods. And once we learned that they were having the second meeting, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Once that process begins, I don't know how you come back from it. So, yeah, today I wasn't surprised he was fired. When you look at it in totality and you think, what just happened? This guy was carrying the Lombardi Trophy around 3 years ago, and now he's out. That part of it's shocking, but you're right. And in just this offseason, when you see the way things have gone, not really that shocking. Let's get into Jeff's press conference a little bit because
we have to.
Yeah, we have to. There was a lot there and nothing there. And I think at least the one thing that was very clear, not very clear, but the one thing that was a little more clear, it's pretty obvious they did not see eye to eye on the coaching staff. I think that was probably the main reason Doug Pederson is out of a job right now. And we're reading between the lines here, but I think it's pretty obvious that last week when these two guys met and Doug said, hey, I want to do this, 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 and this. And Jeff said, no way, you do that, you're out. And Doug kind of came back today and said, well, this is what I'm doing. And if not, then that's it. And I think it's pretty clear that they didn't see eye to eye on coaching staffs, and the front office wanted to dictate to Doug Pederson what his staff would look like, kind of like they've done for his first 5 years on the job. And it seemed like Doug finally said no, like this is not. I'm not going to do it again, and that led to his firing. That's at least the way I read it.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. I think there was probably other things in addition to the coaching staff that they clashed on philosophically. Jeff Lurie made several references to differing philosophies over winning now versus building for the long run. A lot of this didn't make sense because Jeff would, it's hard to even kind of get a grasp on what his message was, but he if you're a coach, you want to win now. I mean, what's the message if you say, I don't want to win next year? And we've seen that in Jeff's own words, the NFL is a nonlinear progression. Teams go, the Browns, the teams every year go from 4 wins to 11, 12 wins. There's no reason you can't do it if you make a couple of the right moves. So for Jeff Lurie to kind of blame Doug Pederson on wanting to win in 2021 as opposed to building something for the long range. I mean, the two aren't mutually exclusive, and the best teams do that. And so yeah, I just if it came down to differing philosophies, I'm with Doug on his philosophy that, yeah, let's try to win football games this year, because the whole notion of building for the future, there's free agency, there's injuries, guys retire. I mean, there's just you can't think about 2022 maybe from a cap perspective, but not from a trying to win perspective. I mean, what's the message to the fans? Like, yeah, we don't want to win next year. We want to win in 2023. So I don't get that part of it. I don't understand that part of it. I don't know why Jeff Lurie, and I tried to ask him this, and I'm not sure he even got the question, but, I want a coach that wants to win in 2021. And part of being an owner of a team is balancing trying to win for the long term and also, trying to be competitive and be really good this year. So a lot of it didn't make sense, but yeah, there was obviously some clear philosophical differences. I think they go beyond the staffs into, I'm sure personnel was a big part of it. I'm sure, vision as far as, I don't know. I'm sure there was a lot of different things. I'm sure Carson was at the heart of it as well. I think it's safe to say that if Doug was going to be here, Carson wasn't. I think there's a chance Carson will be here without Doug, but I also think there's a chance neither of them will be here. But I'm sure Carson also was a big part of the disconnect there.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. And you're right. I mean, as far as win now versus winning later, I don't know if there's a coach in the world who would be totally on board for not trying to win games. And they put Doug in that position. I mean, to be kind of interviewing him to keep his job, of course he's going to try to win games because he's trying to coach for his job. I mean, that's the natural tendency. You're right about Carson. I mean, that had to come up. I don't think it was the main reason, but I think it's a part of the reason, right? I mean, I think that the Eagles would prefer they get Carson Wentz back to playing at Carson Wentz level, but I also thought Jeff Lurie didn't necessarily speak about Carson Wentz like a franchise quarterback on Monday either. He wasn't talking about him like, yeah, we got to get Carson back. This next head coach he didn't talk about that stuff at all. He definitely left open the possibility of trading Carson Wentz.
Well, he called him an asset.
He did. And that's kind of a signal, I think, to other teams that he's available. We'll see. I don't think that decision has been made. I think the way they're going to handle this is they're going to hire the next head coach. And I'm sure those discussions will come up in the interview process. But I don't think it disqualifies a coach if they say, I don't think Carson Wentz is the guy. I don't think that'll disqualify him. If they say, I think he's the guy, I think I can fix him, they'll probably listen. But I don't think their future is contingent on Carson Wentz anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. And I think they might even want a coach to come in and say, no, I don't want that guy here. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. And, it makes you wonder if what they're thinking at number 6, if they're going to go quarterback, especially when Lurie's talking about this long range, we want to be good in 2022, 23, 24, 25, but it's not about next year. If you thought Carson was fixable, wouldn't you be thinking, we can win 10, 11 games with Carson next year, because he's been so good from 17 to 19. Why, so the fact that they're thinking long-term, that he's thinking the next 5 years, tells me it's not about Carson. It's about a different quarterback, maybe somebody they're going to draft this year.
Possible. I don't know how, Carson's opinionated. I don't know how he'd feel about sitting through a rebuild. It doesn't seem like that would make sense to pay a quarterback. Even if he bounces back and has a decent year next year, you're stuck paying him. So you can't have a rebuild and it just doesn't work like that. So yeah, maybe a quarterback at 6, or maybe they take the opportunity to try to get up higher and draft a quarterback. I think that's a possibility too. Or maybe it's Jalen Hurts. I don't know. If they try to hire Lincoln Riley and they lure him out of Oklahoma, then your quarterback's Jalen Hurts. Or if it's Greg Roman, then your quarterback's probably Jalen Hurts. I think that I don't think they necessarily know where they're going yet with the quarterback position,
which is only the most important position on the team. Yeah, but I wonder if there's something Jeff Lurie wants to hear the candidates say. I wouldn't be shocked if he wants the candidates to say, you know what, I'm not tied to Carson. I think that might help candidates.
Interesting.
I really do.
I wanted to run something by you. Joe Banner tweeted that he'd be shocked if the Eagles made this move without having a candidate in mind. Interesting, right? I mean, do you think they have someone already in mind? And this is off script. I just thought about it. But do you think there's someone that they've already pinpointed?
We've talked about you going off script. And, you know,
I'm always the main culprit here.
We're not happy with it. Our sponsors are not happy with it. Wouldn't surprise me. And that kind of points to maybe not one of the top considered guys, you know, the Eric Bieniemy or you know, I don't know. I think that's very possible. I think everything that Jeff Lurie does is set up that way. And I think it's going to be Mike Kafka. I really do. I think I thought that for a while. You know, Jeff Lurie likes to invent guys. He's never hired a head coach that's ever been a head coach. I think I might have said that on the podcast this morning. Have we ever done 2 pods in a day?
I don't know. Maybe
after a Sunday night game, like on a Monday morning, and then later in the day, Monday. But he's never hired a previous NFL head coach. You know, each guy, I mean, Andy had never even been a coordinator. I mean, Chip had never coached in the NFL. He likes inventing guys. I don't think Doug was at the top of anybody's list. You know,
he wasn't at the top of their list either.
No, that's true too. I don't think he was even on most people's lists. You know, maybe Ray Rose might have been the most by the book guy he ever hired. He was a pretty highly regarded defensive coach, but that was also 25 years ago. I think he wants to invent someone. I think Jeff Lurie likes to be the guy that invents. You know, he has so much pride in being the guy that invented Andy Reid, and I think he tried to do it with Chip. You know, I think he wants to go out of the box. I think there's certain value in. I mean, there's a reason the top candidates are the top candidates, but I'll bet it's somebody. I'll bet it's somebody who's not like one of the top considered guys around the league. Just because that's the way he thinks.
That wouldn't surprise me. I can't believe we lasted this long, but most of the questions during that press conference were about Howie Roseman, and rightfully so. If you were a fan and you wanted to hear the owner hold his general manager accountable, you tuned into the wrong press conference, because Jeff thinks Howie's doing great.
And his explanation, his reasoning for this was preposterous. You know, number one, we had the right guys scouted, but they just got picked before us. It must be
dumb luck.
Must be the most absurd thing I've ever heard. First of all, you got embarrassed the last 2 drafts because of the wide receivers taken after you. But I mean, the whole idea of picking players is to pick the best guy who's there. You know that the guys who are better are going to get taken. So to use that as an excuse for Howie is preposterous. It's I just couldn't believe I was hearing it. He said it like 3 different times. You know, yeah, we like Chase Young, but you know what? He just got snapped up just before we could get him, and we just didn't have any plan B there. We just didn't know what, you know. And the other thing, you know, the notion that, I mean, and he said, you know, what did he say? He's got 5 potential GMs on the staff. He's done a great job because he keeps hiring good people around him. So what?
GM factory.
What's that? The
GM factory.
He all but said that. And you had a great line on our special we just did with Barrett and Michael Barkan that, maybe they should hire one of those 5 guys to replace Howie. If you have all these good GM candidates, maybe hire one of them. How's it helping you if you keep drafting bad players, no matter who's on your staff? I mean, it's
the thing he said that bothered me was that he sees the process, and like he sees it better than us because he sees the whole process and he knows the process is working. It's not all that matters are results. That is all that matters, is that you get good players and you win football games because you have good players. I could give a damn if their process is working in his eyes because they scouted good players and they didn't draft them. Who the hell cares?
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of in reference to the guys that we really liked were taken ahead of where we picked, but we were right about them. I mean, what are you talking about? It might be the most, Dave, I've covered this team for 34 years. That might be the most ridiculous, preposterous, absurd thing I've ever heard.
I mean, that happens to every team. Players get drafted. Good players get drafted earlier. That's how drafts work. And it's up to you to figure out how to draft players at your position. I couldn't believe he said it. I mean, and that completely overlooks the fact that in the last 2 drafts, the exact opposite has happened. The guys behind them are better. What are we talking about here?
As Dave points to the back of his den. Yeah, it was so over the top. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've defended Jeff Lurie every step of the way since he got here. I think he's been a good owner, but the things he said today are indefensible. And his defense of Howie Roseman, because Howie keeps doing worse and worse and worse, and so Jeff has to reach farther and farther and farther to defend him, and he does it just unflinchingly. It's one of the stranger things I've ever seen. He's almost like he's laughing at the questions. Oh, no, Howie? No, come on. What does he see? There's so few things that every Eagles fan has, try to come up with 5 things every Eagles fan has been united about. I mean, there's I can't think of, Doc, everyone loved Doc. You can't find anyone that didn't like Doc. I mean, there's how many other things are there? Every major issue is divisive, but you can't find one person that follows football that's going to tell you Howie Roseman has done a good job. So where's this coming from? What does he see that, nobody else sees?
I don't know, but this press conference, one of the first answers, he started almost word for word, took a Howie Roseman answer and started using it when he was talking about how they sacrificed long-term for short-term. We were trying to run it back, all that stuff that Howie uses as an excuse last week. Jeff almost word for word brought that same excuse back on Monday. And the second I heard that, I went, that's not a good sign. If he's going to be parroting the general manager, it kind of shows how locked in to one another they are.
Right.
And I keep thinking back to 2016. I remember being at the owners' meetings and getting a chance to talk to Jeff Lurie and asking him if Howie was going to be held accountable. And he sat there and said in front of everyone, yes, he will be accountable for everything this offseason, because that was before they had hired Joe Douglas, and going forward. And he hasn't been. The exact opposite's happened. He has more power.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just to refresh everyone's memory, one Pro Bowler in the last 7 drafts. And I get that the Pro Bowl isn't, the end all be all of good players, but they don't have good young players. The last defensive player the Eagles drafted after the first half of the first round was Trent Cole in 2005, last Pro Bowl player not drafted in the first half of the first round, 15 years ago. And and Jeff just sat up there and defended. And then one of his rationales for how they have good players here is because they've been to the NFC Championship game in a quarter of his seasons as owner. I mean, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2008. That's 5 of them. And then so in the last 12 years, he's been a 1, which they won, and they won the Super Bowl, and that's great. But Howie became the GM in 2010. So only one of those NFC Championship games is with Howie as the general manager. So, I mean, he was just making stuff up at that point. I mean, he was just tangling himself into this pretzel of illogic, trying to rationalize keeping Howie Roseman, and not just keeping him, but lauding him like he's the savior of the franchise. It was bizarre, and I just can't believe it. If I wasn't working, I would have just shut my computer down because it was hard to watch.
It was not a lot of sense coming out of it.
And, and Jeff didn't make a lot of sense on a lot of things. I mean, Jeff has a tendency to ramble, and, he has a tendency to ramble. But
and there's always a lot of corporate BS speak too that's hard to kind of decipher, and it's hard to. He doesn't speak directly, so you have to kind of figure out what the hell he's trying to say, and sometimes there's not a lot of logic either. So it's you're trying to read through the BS, and there's nothing underneath it.
Yeah, and there were a lot of times in, what was it, 42 minutes? Did you say?
About 42 minutes, yeah.
There was so many instances where I think I messaged you on MS Teams. I said, I just don't know what he's talking about. I literally do not know what he's talking about. And, on that Zoom call, man, there were a lot of blank stares from the media because there was a lot of people that didn't know what he was talking about. And you would think in 42 minutes, you'd get some answers, you get some explanations, you get a sense of, where the franchise is, where he is. We don't talk to Jeff very often, a couple times a year, maybe 3 times a year. Sometimes he talks, before the season, but not always. He'll talk at the owners' meetings, if there are owners' meetings. And then when somebody gets fired or hired, I guess the next time we'll talk to him is when he hires Mike Kafka. But there's so much.
I think Rory Seagrass is going to get the job.
There's just so many. We should do a list of like 10 people that are just definitely not candidates. Carson Walsh, Roy Seagrass.
Well, if Howie's the decision maker, I don't think either of us are going to be.
No. But yeah, it was. I mean, after we were done with Lurie, I didn't feel like there was any more clarity. There might be less clarity than when it started. It was.
And if you're a fan listening to it, I just don't know how you can feel confident in the direction of this franchise.
Fair.
It just seems completely rudderless right now. I don't know where it's going. Nothing I heard on Monday instilled any confidence. In fact, I think you have a reason to feel less confident in the direction of the franchise.
Who's the quarterback? We don't know. Who's the head coach? Well, we just fired the guy that won the Super Bowl. Who's the GM? The guy who can't draft players. That's where you are as a franchise.
Yeah. What'd you make of his answer about him meddling?
He
Total
said
BS?
I'm sorry?
Total BS?
Well, he said he meddles at the same rate that he's always meddled, basically.
Which, I don't think is true.
Yeah, I don't either. I think he started out meddling a lot early, and then I think I think Andy didn't really let him do it.
And I guess Andy had the clout at that point to be like, no, get away.
Yeah. But there's no question that he has more. What's he going to say? Again, as the owner, he has every right to do it, but there's consequences. And I think today we saw what those can be.
Yeah, I wish he would go full heel and be like, yeah, it's my team. I'll do whatever I want.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really the only acceptable answer. And, when you have a rookie coach, maybe I think there's times where an owner should be involved in certain decisions, big decisions. But when you've got a guy going into a 6th year that brought you a Super Bowl, that's been in the playoffs through the last 4 years, You got to trust that guy. You don't start questioning every single thing he does. And again, Jeff trusts Howie and doesn't trust Doug, and that's why Doug's not here.
Yeah, I think I said it on the podcast we did earlier today, but to me, it was clear that Doug just outgrew the arrangement they had when he was hired as a rookie head coach, because back then, no one else was going to hire him. So this was his chance to be a head coach. And it came with stipulations, and the stipulations were basically, we're going to pick your staff for the most part. You're going to have some say. We're going to let you think like you're going to make believe that you have say here, but here's your defensive coordinator. Here's Jim Schwartz. We really like that Jeff Stoutland. Like all those things were kind of decided for him. And that was fine in 2016. But when the guy wins a Super Bowl, he deserves to have his voice heard more. He deserves to have decision-making power. And look, based on the report that we heard on Monday about his suggestions for the staff, it didn't instill a lot of confidence either. I mean, it didn't seem like he had it figured out, but I thought he deserved that chance. And I guess he wasn't willing to go along with the setup anymore.
Yeah, and good for him. I mean, at some point you gotta hold your ground. You got to stick to your guns, and I mean, Doug
he died on the Press Taylor Hill.
So he really did. Hey, all month long, NBC Sports Philadelphia presents Headstrong, Men's Health and Sports Headstrong, a series about men's health told through the powerful stories involving the athletes that we love. Learn more on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com/headstrong.
So Jeff Lurie said the Eagles will hire a coach that's either offensive or defensive. He doesn't care, which is not true. He's going to hire an offensive coach. We all know that.
Could be a special teams guy. Coach Rurie's still in the mix.
Yeah, I somehow think he's going to hire an offensive coach. He admitted he's already been looking at candidates. He says he does that every year, which I don't know how the future coaches of this team are going to feel about that. But I do believe him about that. I think he certainly kind of gets a sense of the candidates around the league every year. I'm sure this year a little amped up or a little ramped up rather. He's looking for a head coach, and I think he's been looking for a head coach for a while. I don't know if he has a guy in mind. He made it pretty clear that it's going to be his decision with input from Howie Roseman, Don Smolenski, but it seems like it's up to him. And if it's up to him, you might be right about Mike Kafka.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what to think. I mean, I'm just kind of guessing. I just have a hunch. I had a hunch about Doug right from the get-go in 2016. I can't even explain totally why. But it's amazing. It would be, I mean, the connections between the Eagles and Chiefs are, pretty amazing. I mean, between Doug and Andy and, and even Bieniemy and Mike. And I mean, there's just so many connections. It'll be hard to get somebody. I think Jeff has a ton of respect for the Andy Reid coaching tree. He's seen the success that Sean McDermott's having, that Harbs has had for over a decade. I
mean, heck, the success Doug had.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. I mean, Ron Rivera, who did a really terrific job. I just think it's going to be somebody from Andy's coaching tree. I really do. Unless Jeff just wants to go totally in another direction, which is certainly possible. I think trying to figure Jeff Lurie out right now is probably not an easy thing to do. I think it'll be an offensive guy that's never been a head coach in the NFL, which only really disqualifies a couple people from your list. I mean, your list was all offensive players. I think a couple of them had been head coaches, 2 or 3 of them. So
I think just Caldwell.
Yeah, just Caldwell. I was disappointed not to see Coach Marty on the list. I think Coach Marty deserves a shot.
You think Deuce will really get a shot? That was one thing. Yeah, Jeff mentioned it was actually in response to a question about minority hiring practices, and he brought up Deuce on his own. They interviewed Deuce in 2016 for for the head coaching position. They interviewed him last year to be the offensive coordinator, and maybe the year before when they hired Mike Groh, actually. But I don't have, I think we talked about this morning too. I'm getting tired now, but I don't have a lot of faith there. I think he'd be a good head coach. I really do. I
do too. I think he commands a lot of respect. I think he understands the running game and the passing game. I mean, he's not a guy who's going to come out and run 50 times a game. Yeah, I think he gets typecast because he's a running backs coach, but I think he would call a pretty good game. I think he'd call more running plays than Doug, but I don't think he'd be out there running 1950s game plans. Mike Leach would call more running plays than Doug. I think he'd be terrific. It's funny how Bieniemy, Deuce, and Doug were all teammates. It is kind of crazy. All teammates in 1999 on Andy's first team. Do you ever think that watching that 99 team that you might see two Eagles head coaches out there? Watching that 99 team, I was wondering if Andy would even make it to 2000. But I mean, we kind of thought maybe Troy Vincent would be a coach, a guy like that. Who knows? I mean, Bieniemy I think he could be in the mix. I mean, it doesn't seem like Atlanta's going that way. It doesn't seem like Houston's going that way. Houston didn't even interview him. Yeah, Houston didn't even want to interview him, but they wanted Dave Culley. Maybe Dave Culley's a guy. Maybe James Urban. Maybe I didn't put Culley on my list. Urban was on the list. Yeah. And Culley emerged as a candidate with the Texans. Culley was Andy's wide receivers coach his whole time here, and then the first couple of years in KC. And they went and coached quarterbacks under Sean McDermott in Buffalo, and he's now with Harbs. He's made the whole rounds. He's coached for everybody in the Andy tree. But I don't think he would be a viable candidate here. I think Jeff Lurie wants. I mean, Culley's 65. He's got to be up there. He's been around forever. Yeah, I'd be surprised. And he coached for like 15 years in college before he even started his NFL career in '94. I think. I think Lurie wants a younger guy that he can, who can be here for a decade, and I think he's big on youthful energy. That whole, he likes. There's just a certain look, a certain energy, a certain style that he's attracted to. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. It will be. And that's another crazy thing he said. He said, I don't care if we're the last team to hire a guy, because that means that we have our pick of all the guys who are out there. If every other team has hired their guy, it's almost like they're at an advantage because they have their pick of everyone who's left. That makes no sense. In a weird way, I kind of get what he's saying, that like if you're the last team left, you can take your time at that point. But if you're the first team, you have your pick of everyone, not the other six guys that already got hired. Sure, but then you might feel obligated to rush into it. And I think his point was that they're not going to rush. That's fine. You can say we won't be rushed if we're the last team, but don't say we're at an advantage because we have our pick of everyone. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And it wasn't even the dumbest thing he said today. I can't believe it. He's going to have to sell the team. Get Brayman back up here. If you enjoy the Eagle Head podcast, do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. We'll be back with you guys later in the week as the Eagles go through this coaching search that I didn't anticipate, but here we are.